The science says that the higher the heart rate, the more our body relies on carbohydrate, glycogen, etc. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, MMA use carbohydrates. So if you're training, don't be afraid to have a good amount of carbohydrates in your day.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Matteo Capodaglio. There is now a website for the show. Check out www.maynideapodcast.com or click the link in the show notes and become part of the community. Here you'll gain access to Ask Me Anything, products that are helping me perform at my best, and any future event related to the show. And as many of you know, I've been designing very high quality custom rash guards for the show listeners. The design is finalized. It's featuring art from Venice tattoo artist Jordan Hart and quality production from the homies over at Perry Athletics. The pre-order form for these are going to go live within the next 2 weeks, and they're going to first go to the community subscribers, which is free to do on the website. It's right there on the homepage. Once these sell out, they won't be made again. So may do a future run down the line, but this initial batch of rash guards will be limited in supply. So if you don't want to miss the order for them, make sure to join at the website. And for the true fans of the show that want to support it, please take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to the YouTube. This helps the show get discovered organically, and it helps me to continually bring on incredible guests. There's also now timestamps in the show notes, so feel free to jump around to the part that interests you most, although I always recommend listening to the episode in its entirety. Dr. Matteo Capodaglio is a sports nutritionist and doctor of pharmacy who holds a master's degree in human nutrition from the University of Milan. He handles the nutrition science behind top-tier combat sports athletes such as Dante Leon, Marvin Vettori, and lightweight phenom Arman Tsarukyan. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Without further ado, Dr. Matteo Capodaglio. Matteo, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. You're working with some of my favorite fighters, and I'm sure you're extremely busy. So to have you here on the show to talk about one of my favorite subjects, one of the most important subjects in sports, it really means a lot. So I appreciate that, brother.
You're very welcome. Can I say buongiorno in the most Italian fashion?
Buongiorno. I don't have a very good Italian tongue. It's all Spanish, but that's my best effort.
All good. No worries, no judgment. I also have this mustache now that reminds me about the Inglorious Bastard scene with Brad Pitt doing the buongiorno.
It's so good. He goes, Margheriti.
Exactly.
It's funny. That movie is so epic. You just had such an incredible weekend. Arman Tsarukyan looked like an absolute machine. He looked like someone who came prepared to fight for a title, not just fight for another rung on the ladder. How did you get to a place where you're working alongside of some of the most competitive fighters in the world?
Well, I'm glad you asked because it's a great story. You probably don't expect what I'm about to say. It was probably 2010, 2011. I was completing my doctorate degree, my PharmD at the University of Rome. For some reason, it was pretty easy for me to get that degree, and I had a lot of free time. I remember watching YouTube at the time and hearing about this Pride Fighting Championship. From there, I subscribed to the only MMA forum in Italy at the time because I wanted to know more about the sport, right? So I started to write there, and the play-by-play announcer for the UFC on Sky Sports in Italy reads one of my comments that I guess was articulated, was, as they say in America, well-spoken. My Italian is much better than my English. He sent me a DM and told me, he told me that he was starting this MMA newspaper And if I wanted, of course, for free, it's like, a gig. I could have, it
Right.
could have got me to local events, and I could have wrote about the Italian prospect and whatnot. So it was, I think, about 2013, and I go to this event in Rome. I still remember was called Impera FC. They don't do it anymore. And I'm a 24-year-old fanboy, basically, that is studying for his degree in Rome. At the event at the time, there were some pretty big names. People that in local promotion fought against. Alexander Gustafsson before he made it to the UFC. So among them, there was this kid
Wow.
that didn't receive any attention because he was just a 19-year-old kid. But I did my research. I studied all the stats. I was pretty stoked to take part to my first MMA event, even as a blogger, if you want. And so while everyone was focusing on these big
Right.
names, and no one, by the way, made it to the UFC, or maybe some of them are in Bellator right now, I spent so much time talking to this 19-year-old kid that was left alone as well, like I did, and we connected. You know who that kid was?
Marvin Vettori.
It
It's got
was
to be Marvin
Marvin
Vettori.
Vettori. Yes, sir. And after that event, I reached out to him and I told him, listen, you're new to the sport. I'm new to the sport. I know a couple of things about science. I could help you, to pick, to make right choices on the performance side. And that's how the whole thing started. From that, one thing led to another. We came to California the first time in 2015. He got the visa in 2016. I came a couple of years later, and yeah, that's the story.
When you're back there looking at a fighter like Marvin Vettori at 19 years old, you're a fan of the sport, and you're at this event blogging for free, right? Taking these steps in the right direction. What did you feel like you could offer a fighter like that? I think at this point, and we will be able to unpack how much nutrition really impacts your ability to perform, to recover, to peak, to make weight, to do all these things. But at that time, what was Marvin doing in his own nutrition? And what were you able to bring to him as a value and say, hey, I know that this is going to have an impact on the way that you train and the way that you recover?
Yes. Well, it was something much more primordial compared to what we do now. Of course, I wasn't at this skill
Yeah.
level. But at the time, nutrition in MMA was almost not existing. I think the only person that published something about that was Mike Dolce with his 3 weeks to shredded,
Yeah.
which I meticulously
Yep.
meticulously read. I remember I bought the ebook because there was no paper version in Italy. But there was no education about the importance of carbohydrates, for example, the main fuel in performance when it comes to MMA. Weight cuts were more like, you know, the old school way where many people stayed dehydrated for multiple days. And the initial advice, the initial intervention, I remember revolved around that. And then, of course, we started to dig deeper. After I got my doctor of pharmacy, I work a little bit as a pharmacist because I thought that was going to be my career and this was going to be a side gig. But I quit the job,
Yeah.
went back to the university, earned a master's degree in nutrition, University of Milan. So, you know, then of course we how do you say, we upgraded the level of the work. We
Yeah.
started to focus more on supplements, on nutrient periodization. But if I recall correctly, the first two things that stood out to me were the lack of carbohydrates and the old school weight cuts.
Yeah. Marvin is he's a big dude. I mean, he's one of the fighters that looks really big on the day that he fights. And I would imagine he just has to carry a lot of weight in his training, yet he's extremely athletic. I mean, his ability to showcase striking, showcase wrestling, and also provide a gas tank that can last for championship rounds. That's something that you don't always see. I think you see it more now than in the past because top prize fighters have nutritionists and dedicated strength and conditioning coaches, and they have more opportunity to control. But he's a big guy. How do you, like, with a fighter like that, with their output, whether they're in camp or out of it, what is the most difficult thing to manage from their nutritional intake?
Well, first of all, I want to add a note. Marvin, when we started, he was a welterweight, was not a middleweight actually. So this is something not a lot of people know.
Wow.
Yep. But it looked like a different person. Maybe if you scroll down his Instagram page, you can still find pictures of him as a welterweight. But at the time, he was training in London, and he didn't do any strength and conditioning. He literally didn't lift. The only thing he would do was Versa climber. Then what happened is we came to America. We started to train with Corey Beasley, which is the trainer of Chito Vera, and he just became bigger. I think genetically Marvin is predisposed to be big, just because his brother that doesn't really train as much is as big. Right. As like they look like a rugby player, right? So
right. Yeah, totally.
But by the way, you will think that Marvin is heavier than what he actually is. So I will say the big challenge for us is adherence to a plan, especially when he was living in Southern California. There's a lot of traveling to get to the training session. Restaurants, like the restaurants we're looking for, might not be as available. And so sometimes we need to find the compromises that will like do the job, even though then they're not perfect. That I will say is the biggest challenge. And when we talk about Marvin, it's worth mentioning that, of course, I think I do my job with him. He is obsessed with training, with strength and conditioning in particular. Yeah. He rides his bicycle, and he's no offense, of course, I'm using the word maniac not in an offensive way, but just to give an idea.
In a good way.
In a very good way, yes. I heard people back in Italy, they were training with him on the bike, and he was doing pretty famous, going through he was planning to climb a pretty famous mountain, and he just said, I'm not gonna put my feet down the bike. And he did it. He can overcome an excruciating amount of pain while training, and that transferred to his endurance in the octagon. Now, MMA is another type of sport, so there are other variables that go into an athlete being successful. But I'll be honest with you, if we were to do, say, UFC version of the Tour de France or cycling competition or any endurance competition, I'll probably put my money on Marvin. Is one of a kind, really.
I've got a question about the difference between Europe and the United States. So you have a unique perspective here because you studied in Italy, you've worked with fighters in Italy, but you've also immigrated to the United States and you work here stateside now. And from my travels, I'll use last year as an example. Last year, my fiance and I went to Germany for 10 days. And for 10 days, all we did was walk 15 to 25,000 steps a day, eat everything that we wanted to eat, have a beer wherever you want to have a beer. And I put jiu-jitsu training, strength training, everything else on the back burner. It was purely vacation, right? And we came back and I was exactly the same weight and borderline exactly the same body composition. And this is not the first time that this has happened. And it makes me wonder, what is it about the difference between the food and the nutrient intake in Europe versus that in the United States, where you can just constantly consume food, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and it feels like it just doesn't have that same effect that you get. If I did that here in the United States, I would be like a balloon.
But you mean eating European foods in the United States or eating American foods in the United States?
Eating American, so yeah, eating American food in the United States versus eating European food kind of at will in Europe.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me ask you, were you at the Oktoberfest?
I was not.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious. But, talking about the facts, I will say the European food authorities, say the Italian FDA, are more strict with the rules. That's one thing that maybe my work in helping people having access to higher quality food. That's not always the case. Um, but I do think there are a lot of cultural differences, and the portion are much bigger in America, and the lifestyle is much different. As you said, it is part of your daily life to walk in Italy if you live in any city.
Right.
The city are very, very walkable. In America, and I live in California, we have sun like 360 days a year. People don't leave the house by foot. They leave the house driving their cars. And in the end of the day, in the equation, the total daily energy expenditure, you burn less. So my guess is a little bit is that different lifestyle, and also it's different portions when it comes to food, for sure. So if you go to a restaurant, the portion might be different, and the foods are also different. Say you might have, say, I don't know what, a snack on an average base. I think from what I notice in America is a much higher caloric content, a much higher sugar content. In Italy, that's, I mean, you can still find what you will refer as junk food, but is I don't feel like
Right.
it's that packed. And I'm still learning about America. I've been living here 5 years, but sometimes I go to the store and I look at some products. I'm like, I didn't thought these products exist, or the packages. It's like, is this for a family of 12, or is this made for people like the Gronkowski's mom that has like 3 NFL players that are growing? So I wonder
Totally.
what that
Yeah.
is. It's very, very different. But you can also look. I'll give you an example. So one of our ritual, almost like a religion, in the morning you stop at the bar. Coffee shop. In Italy we call it il bar, and you ask for a coffee. So you go like, coffee, per favore. They give you a coffee. It's about 30 milliliter, 1 fluid ounce. For the American listeners, and you might put like a little bit of sugar, but that's it. The coffee like basically doesn't,
A little bit.
doesn't add many calories to your daily intake. You go to Starbucks, there are certain coffees that are 500 calories. And you drink that, you don't even realize.
So messed up.
It's not really filling because you basically drink it, and you're ready. Like, you start the day. The Italian person will walk maybe a mile and have just a coffee, maybe a coffee and a croissant. The American person is driving to work and is stopping by at Starbucks and is getting this calorie packed drink. So you see, and then you go on through the day, and that's what you get in the end.
Yeah, it's funny. My fiance and I, so she studied nutrition at the University of San Diego, and we often, whenever we go somewhere, she'll always say, can I get X, Y, or Z, but can you make it less sweet? And they go, sure. And she goes, how much is a regular sweetness? And a lot of times, if you're at a Starbucks, if you're at a coffee shop, you go, how much is regular sweetness? And they go, 7 pumps. And you go, 7 pumps? Regular? How much is a pump? And they go, about a tablespoon. And you go, you're putting at baseline. So before you add whipped cream, before you add all the stuff that people put in their drinks, at baseline, you're putting 8 tablespoons of sugar syrup in the drink. And like you said, this is on the way to someone's work in their car, right? There's zero caloric expenditure in the process of acquiring it or the process of drinking it on the way to what they're doing. And
Yeah.
it's funny. You also said about the quantity. Like when I was working with clients in LA, we'd be talking about food and nutrition choices. And I'd say, where do you do your shopping? And they go, oh, well, I do shopping at Trader Joe's every week. And I go, okay, what do you usually get there? And they'll go, well, I'll get, seasoned chicken or seasoned steak. And so I'd go to Trader Joe's and I'd look and I'd go, okay, well, what are they really getting here? And so you take a packaged carne asada, right? Or some steak, and you flip it over. And there's like 30 times the daily allotment of sodium for a regular individual. And then the calorie count on the nutrition label is whatever, but the serving size for that package is like 13 servings. So you do the math, and if they were to go home and just eat that for dinner, I mean, we're talking thousands of calories in, with them really not even knowing it, because why would they read the label if they're not interested in this kind of stuff? It's
Yeah.
kind of sad.
Yeah. That's really how it is. You guys use, I never heard like pumps in terms of, as a way to measure the amount of sweetness
Right.
of sugar. As they say, Americans will use anything but
Yeah.
the metric system. It's great.
But the actual, yeah. Well, but that makes sense, right? That's why, is
Yeah.
so that companies can go, oh, well, we only put 6 pumps in there. And someone goes, oh, well, it's only 6.
Yeah.
They don't go, we put, however many ounces in it.
Yeah.
You touched on something that I want to circle back to, which I think is an interesting and also somewhat complicated concept that nutritionists seem to understand very well, which is this idea of energy balance. Could you expand on what energy balance is?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the basic concepts. Like, we have all the books that wrote plenty about it, and basically there is this concept that there are, no magic foods. In the end, there's not a food that makes you lose weight despite the quantity that you eat. Basically, in theory, even if you just eat fruits and veggies in very, very large amounts, theoretically you can gain weight. It's very hard to do it, but at the end of the day, it all comes to the simple equation: calories in and calories out. Where if you eat more than what you burn, then you're gonna gain weight. On the opposite, you're gonna lose weight. Now, how can you influence that equation? For example, by increasing your resting metabolic rate, which is something we can measure at the UFC Performance Institute, for example. It's very, very useful. It makes us understand how if the engine is working, say. So if you're eating enough food, your engine will work properly. You will have a high resting metabolic rate. Those people that go through those 3 months long no carbs, very, very little calories weight cuts, they will probably have a lower resting metabolic rate. And it's I mean, there will be a lot to say about that, but basically, um, our body is smart. We made it this far in our evolution because our body could adapt, and our body is very good at
Mhm.
basically keeping the energy for itself, storing fat. So if we deprive our body from nutrients, from calories for long enough, it will go into what we call the starvation mode, survival mode. You call it the way you prefer. To preserve itself, it will start. The resting metabolic rate will drop. You will feel as a consequence more lethargic, just because your body says like, listen, you're not putting enough energy uh, here. We need to slow you down. Otherwise, basically, we'll get closer to die. You know, this for a long time gave us an how do you say, evolutionary advantage. Now we live in a time of
Right.
opulence, and so it's not it's not as useful like anymore, right? And if you don't have a solid um relationship with food, you don't have that education that helps you, or that guidance to make the right choices. It's very very easy to, you know, to gain weight, to develop some how do you say, um, pathologies, some disease, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. We talk about resting metabolic rate. um, there are of course other factors, the amount of calories that you burn while exercising, the amount of calories that you burn when you're not exercising, but you're still moving. That's what I guess it's pretty big in the average day of an Italian, Spanish person. So you can work on all those
Right.
variables, but in the end, there's going to be a number with a plus or a minus, or I mean, or a zero in your caloric balance, and that will determine basically what happens to the body. As I said, it's a complex matter. We could talk about it for the whole episode, but as I'm sure the listeners want a takeaway message, that's the takeaway message.
Yeah. So if we lean into that, I'm gonna I'm gonna assume for the majority of people that they're not gonna have access to a resting metabolic rate or active metabolic rate assessment, which is the most valuable place to start. You know, if you can get in and do that with a professional, it's incredibly valuable information because you can really fine tune how it is that your actual body spends calories. And so you can ramp those up or decrease them based on your demands. But if we're looking to, maybe we can kind of look at this from like a general principle, right? So if someone is training jujitsu 3 to 4 times a week, or they have mixed martial arts training a couple times a week, and they're managing that with strength training, how would you get them to best start to understand their body and the demands it needs for the sport that they're doing? Like, what are some, if you were to kind of group in a bunch of different jujitsu practitioners and say, hey, I understand the demands of your sport as partially anaerobic, partially aerobic, and involving strength and power. Here's some general principles that you can apply to your week to make sure that you're helping your body recover and also perform.
Okay, it's a great topic to bring up. I will say the first thing is learn about yourself. Take a diary, a journal, and write about how you feel during the day. Write down the foods that you're eating for a week. It's part actually. It's a like create a food diary. Have create that. I guess accountability, that's the right word, right? About what you're really putting in
Yeah,
your
yeah,
body. You can use softwares like MyFitnessPal, and then you'll have an idea of um,
yep,
how many calories you're putting in the body. You can also add to this your weight progression, and you know you will have some basic informations about how things are going for you. Um, I will not rely religiously on fitness tracker
Mhm.
because um, they're not always as reliable. So, say, give an example. Once I talked to an athlete, he told me that his fitness tracker told him that he just burned 370 calories and he was eating exactly what the device told him he spent. I would not be
Mhm.
um, I mean, I will not make, I will not influence my life that much because of a device. The device can kind of give us some feedbacks, but I wouldn't rely on that. I would rely more on the how do you say, the journaling about your nutrition and the weight
Yeah.
evolution and the feedback that you can write down about your day. How did you wake up? Did you wake up rested? Did you wake up sore? Those are the main thing, and this of course is for a person that is trying to do it by themselves. Of course it's different if you have a professional
Right.
that is helping you. I will say to all these people that marketing is a great tool but can be used in wrong ways. The science says that the higher the heart rate,
Yes.
the more our body relies on carbohydrate, glycogen, etc. Um, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, MMA use carbohydrates. So if you're training, don't be afraid to have a good amount of carbohydrates in your day. Um, Sugar, simple carbohydrates, are not necessarily bad for you. It's the excess that can cause issues. So yes, you can eat a banana, you can eat plenty of fruits and still be healthy. You can perform and be healthy. That's definitely something I will tell. I will tell a person. Have enough protein. That's another. That's another important part. Try to rely on what they call uh, good fats. That's another big principle. I'm a big fan of extra virgin olive oil. Have plenty of besides fruits, also veggies. That's another thing that I've seen missing in many athletes' lives. Um, Prioritize hydration uh, and sleep. I think if you start like following these basic but very effectful guidelines, you already did at least half of the job.
So let's dig in a little bit on these and start to separate maybe general health practices from performance health practices. And maybe this is where you can provide a little bit of your expertise on the side of the athlete. So if we're looking at someone who is invested in peak performance, and I'll even group into this maybe someone who's going to compete at no gi worlds or gi worlds, something like that, where you have an end date in mind that is where you are trying to really hone in and peak your performance against a competitor in a sport that we both understand, which is martial arts. So can you kind of unpack what it means to be eating for performance in that setting?
Well, yes, but I mean, Abe, I believe that healthy nutrition choices and performance can happen at the same time. I come from an area where the Mediterranean diet is prevalent, and there are huge correlation, for example, between the Mediterranean lifestyle and longevity. So I try to incorporate the same principles in what I do um, with my athletes. It makes sense scientifically. It's easier for me because I know the nuances of the Mediterranean lifestyle. That's where I lived, and athletes, people like it, so it creates very very good engagement. What changes, of course, is the caloric intake, the carbohydrate intake, that compared to a regular person are much higher. I guess we could discuss if practicing professional sport is good for your health long time, which probably not necessarily,
Right.
uh, because of
Probably is not. Right.
probably is not. If one wants wants to go for longevity, probably shouldn't grapple 5 times per day, 5 times per week, with sprinkles of everyday pohada in it, lift very heavy, and
Yeah.
then go into competition and
Yeah.
maybe be a victim of an uchigari, and fall on his back, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Right.
guess we're all adults. People can make their choices. If that makes you happy and you're willing to sacrifice part of your, I mean, longevity, if you want, well-being, uh, to be
Indeed.
happy in
Indeed.
another
Yeah.
way,
Longevity.
yeah, then
For
you
sure.
can do it. That's It's not just for I think um it's a broad concept. It's not just for sports, it's not just for MMA or combat sport, it's for every sport. I work with NHL athletes that were beat up, to say the least. I work with American football athletes that
Yeah.
got signed with NFL teams, and their bodies is is beat up. Um,
Destroyed.
it's
Destroyed.
Yeah, it's part of
Yeah.
that extreme level of competition that fills arenas and sells pay-per-views. So what we can try to do as performance professional is to diminish, to reduce the impact that certain activities can have on the human body, but we will not be able to cancel, to remove any risk or any damage from professional sport. I think it's in the nature of how do you say, of pushing the body to the extreme against another person that is trying to do the same, right? So that's actually something
Right.
that makes me um, quite mad when discussing the topic of cutting weight. Um, I can say proudly that I never told an athlete that my weight cuts are healthy. So, describing a weight cut process as healthy, I think it's intellectually incorrect. Weight cut is always a risk. It's
Yeah.
probably, we can define it as an occupational risk for a fighter. Can be done in the most, if you want, balanced way. um, we can reduce the amount of weight that we will cut in terms of um, say water, what we call the water that we lose in the last 24 hours. But if the person wants to compete at a weight that is not his natural weight, he will have to accept that is, how do you say, it's getting into an area, it's getting into a process that is risky. So now, if we're adults, if the
Yeah.
person accepts that, what can we say, right? um, uh, I mean, it's one choice to do it. The importance is being transparent about about the process, about what we do. I think the UFC Performance Institute has been doing a great job by providing athletes for free with DEXA scan. For people that don't know, a DEXA scan is basically means like you're gonna lay on a bed.
Yep.
It's not really a bed, but it's, how do you say, a surface, and you have a scanner that uses
Yep.
low X-rays that will go through the body and will tell you what's your lean mass, what's your fat mass, what's your bone density. So, and the PI will give you a paper that tells you the weight and where you are in relationship yeah, in relationship to your weight class. So you can be in a green zone where you're like, okay, yeah, you can make weight. It's not gonna be a big deal. You can be in the orange zone and be like, starts to be a process. It's like it's gonna take some
A little
effort.
tough.
And then you have the red one, and it's like, well, we can consider strategies. We can decide to drop on lean mass. That is also like a way to go if you want to make weight. But considering where you are right now, where's your weight and what's your lean mass, if you want to make weight with these, say, parameters, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard on you. It's gonna be it's not gonna be definitely a walk on the park. Not that the green and the yellow, the orange area are a walk in the park, but especially the red one uh, is requires some pretty how do you say drastic intervention. Some athletes are okay with that. What can I say? Some athletes they listen when you say you should move up a weight class. So it depends from person to person.
Right.
What do you think about this topic?
Can you describe to me what is happening physiologically when someone goes through a weight cut?
Yes. I mean, I cannot really go into details because I think an MD will have the expertise, someone whose expertise is internal medicine. But yeah, basically there are two different. I will say there are different phases during the fight week. Unlikely, what you think the person drinks, depending on how much weight they need to cut, up to like very close to the official weigh-ins. Might be sometimes it's like 6 hours, sometimes it's 8 hours. There's When you get to that point, people usually start to do what we call the active part of the weight cut, where you will engage in some exercise with the goal of depleting the glycogen that is in your muscle.
Yep.
And we know that it's not just the glycogen, it's the water that's in Italy we say si
Right.
coordina. It's coordinated. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's I say entangled with the glycogen, uh, but it's linked,
Yeah.
connected to the glycogen, which is about
Yep.
2.4, 2.7 grams of water per grams of glycogen. So you will deplete your glycogen. You will also sweat. And then after that, to cut the last part of the weight, you rely on passive dehydration, which is basically doesn't involve
So that's
exercise.
like sauna, bathtub
Yeah, exactly.
stuff. Yep.
Yes. And of course, on top of that, during fight weeks, there are other techniques to try to drop body weight. For example, lowering fiber content in the diet in the last 2-3 days before weigh-ins to basically decrease the amount of weight that's related to feces. And yeah, essentially at the time,
Yep.
it always depends on the amount of weight that has been cut. But I can tell you, in 99% of the cases, the athlete that steps on the scale is glycogen depleted, meaning that if you had to push for prolonged amount of time, uh, will not be able to perform, and he's dehydrated to a certain extent. That is the main, I guess, the main issues with weight cuts. So um,
So people always guesstimate, like when you see a fighter step on the scale, and sometimes, let's say they went through a pretty substantial cut and they
yes,
look emaciated, they look dehydrated, they look kind of like taut in their face. And then you see them, I mean, even Arman, right? You guys had an incredibly successful cut. He looked pretty healthy. He looked thin, but they all do when they get
Yeah.
on the scale. And then when he came in, he looked, much more filled out.
Yeah.
But he also looked like he was ready to fight for 25 rounds straight. I mean,
Hmm.
the guy's a freak. How much is their body changing from the time that they get on the scale to the next morning? Because fans, I think, always like to speculate, especially online. Oh, he put on 25 pounds. They put on 30 pounds. Oh, they must be walking around at this and they fight at that. What is a realistic range that we see in a fighter who steps on the stage, like Arman,
Yeah.
and then goes in and fights, and they're visibly larger, they're visibly more filled out, they look healthy again? What's that 24 or 48 hour period like for the fighters?
Again, sorry, Abe, if I bring it up many times, but we need to really make sure that people understand that every athlete is different. So you cannot really drop numbers for everyone. I can tell you, you're asking me about the 155 division,
Yep.
Arman, and I can tell you that I believe that at the UFC level, there are not many athletes that will wait at the time of the competition less than 170 pounds,
Mhm.
to give you an idea. Uh,
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
there are also some variables to consider because we need to be precise in the description of this recharge process. So if we go from a state of um, glycogen depletion to properly reintroducing the carbohydrates in the body, there's some evidence that the body might retain more. So you actually wait
Gotcha.
more than if you didn't. At least might be, yeah. You wait more than if you didn't do the deload and then the reload, the super compensation.
Yep.
There's a lot of research about that in the endurance world. So cycling, running, triathlon. Um, and there's also another thing to say is um, at the time of the competition it's usually later at night, and and of course a person gains weight throughout the day while the weigh-ins are first thing in the morning. So, but
Right.
I will say that a large amount of lightweight will not wake up the day of the competition less than 167. I'm pretty confident about this
Yeah.
statement. Now there are still people that don't cut. You
And
remember
so
though?
they're gaining this back. You made a good point. Like the fights are often in the evening. Some of these guys are fighting. Main card starts at 7 p.m. for a pay per view. So these guys are fighting at 11:30, almost midnight. And so you've had the weigh-ins, what, a day and a half before, and then you have the whole time where you're actually just kind of eating naturally, and maybe you're alongside your nutritionist, or you're kind of following them around, and you guys are talking
Yeah,
about how they feel and what they're, how much they're walking that day, if they're going to do light pad work or something like that. And so by the time you get to that evening, they've had a full normal day of being themselves, right? And so
yes,
you're just going to retain water weight, you're going to fill out more. And so, even though, and I agree, I think it's very important to disclose that there is no weight cut that is a healthy weight cut. The act of weight cutting itself is a performance based thing to do for sport. And that's very important, because I think that sometimes people see what these athletes do and they go, hey, we look to athletes for pretty much everything. We look to them to try to be like them, to emulate how they work out, to emulate how they sleep. Why don't we also emulate how they control their weight? And if you're an average person just cutting weight for a family event, it's not a process that the average person's body should be going through. If your goals are more days on the planet, longevity, and a good relationship with food,
of
that is
course.
such a key point to make. I appreciate that you said that.
It's important, and some people might somehow appreciate the challenge that comes from a wake up because they say it makes them mentally
Right.
stronger. Yeah, but this world has a wide variety of people, and people like Tim Kennedy, to give you an example, are not that are quite rare, I will say. So I wouldn't
Right.
yeah I will really I'm trying to put an effort on that, and losing, by the way, some substantial amount of uh, possibility of financial gain, because if I were to create a program like lose 10 pounds in 3 days, 72 hours, write an ebook, I probably make a lot of money out of it. I just don't think it's correct.
Yeah.
Cutting weight
Right.
is it comes with a level of danger. um, might give you an advantage in the cage, but it's an occupational risk. That is the thing that we need to make sure people do. That if people want to do it, they fully understand it. That's good. They need to be adults, though. I'm against younger people cutting weight.
Yeah.
I I think there's also another It's
Yeah.
not as much MMA related because I don't think you can fight as a pro when you're underage. But jiu-jitsu related,
Yeah.
yes, it is.
But jujitsu,
It is.
you work with Dante Leon, and
Yes.
I was able to have him on the show, which was amazing to talk to him. And he's such a phenom of like a true strength training enthusiast, and he's invested with you on working closely on his nutrition, and he's a high class world competitor, right? I mean, this guy is of the best available right now, and hearing him and also seeing what he shares, I think it's really interesting when he shares the tracking that you guys are doing. It appears to be a very a rather healthful approach where he's eating food that tastes good, that looks good, that is good, and he's doing it in a way that allows him to maintain his strength
Yeah.
and then compete at a high level, which
Yes.
is, I mean, I feel like that's kind of what everybody wants to do, but they have a tough time managing those two things. When you're working with someone like Dante, how do, like, when you think about the demands of jujitsu are obviously very different than the demands of mixed martial arts, right? Being in a cage for 25 minutes with an unlimited amount of possibilities that could happen is going to be a different demand on your body than if you're at Nogi Worlds. You know exactly how long the match is going to be. You're limited in the strikes that you can give or receive. It's going to be a grappling exchange. When you look at his demands versus, let's say, another guy like Marvin Vettori, what's the biggest difference that you see with grappling sports and jiu-jitsu specifically
Well, to be honest with
from
you,
a nutritional view?
yeah, I wouldn't say, to be honest with you, working with many different athletes that nutrition for grappling or wrestling, because I also work with wrestlers, is too different
Yep.
compared to MMA, in the sense that the training session, from what I've seen so far, are pretty similar. What can change is the nutrition and supplementation protocol on competition day, being IBJJF
Yep.
type of competition where you need to compete multiple times. So I will say that both the
Yeah.
nutrition and supplementation protocol, say off competition, of Marvin and Dante, are Arman and Dante are quite similar. Um, what it changes is the way we fuel the competition, for sure. So that's the main thing, and
Right.
we definitely use more in jiu-jitsu those carbs gel. I don't know if you're familiar with it. C Sports
Like
makes one.
goo.
Yeah,
Goo.
Goo. I don't know the brand Goo. I
Yeah.
use Martin, I heard. I mean, I use
Well, it's like glucose, right? It's like a glucose gel.
yeah, yeah. Some of them might have a mix of
Okay.
maltodextrin and other carbohydrates. Some they have fructose, but yeah. We use that a lot because we need to recharge in between bouts. But besides that, and another thing, it's my I will say chef touch. It depending on the competition. But say you have a competition like Worlds, you if you're taking say on any caffeine, that could be a supplement. You can take it like the Italian way with coffee, or through a supplement. You might want to wait, especially if you have an athlete like Dante, till the semifinals or the finals, so they can kick in when they're really needed, instead of like having like caffeine throughout the whole day. Might be a little disrupting for the guy at the end of the day. While of course MMA, as you said, it's one shot competition. So you'll take your carbohydrates, your caffeine, right before the bout, and only once.
So let's talk briefly about carbohydrates, because
Yes.
this is I think in diet culture, right? In diet culture, carbohydrates are often demonized.
Yes.
In the carnivore diet, they want you to get away from them. In X, Y, or Z diet, they want you to get away from them, because carbohydrates, if they're unused, are going to turn to fat, and then you're going to add weight, and then you're going to be out of shape. And so you should just eat a low carb diet or avoid carbohydrates. Don't eat bread. Don't eat rice. It's all this don't eat this, don't eat that approach, which I think is horrible, because it's it's just not true. You can totally eat those things in the right quantities. In fact, you should, because the sports that you're doing demand that you have them in your engine. But how should we view, as enthusiasts of martial arts and jiu-jitsu and strength training, right?
Yeah.
How should we view carbohydrates? What are they doing for us? Why are they important? And how should we consume them in and around our sport?
Yes, great question. So first of all, we're talking about the general population. There are some medical conditions where we're not gonna get into that, where low carb diets might be helpful, but we're just talking about the general population, right? General athletic population.
Yep.
Carbohydrate, guys, as we said earlier, it's fuel. The heart start beating faster. Carbohydrates are gonna be needed. We can have them as we exercise, or we can store them. As we said, the form of storage for carbohydrates is called glycogen. We find it in the muscles, when we find it in the liver, and it's easy to have access to it compared to fat storage. Our body stores much more energy in fat compared to carbohydrates, but that's not easily accessible. So you want to perform in this sport, you need to put to it those damn carbohydrates. Timing, depending on the type of session. It's always depends, because every scenario asks for a different intervention. Are we having open mat, everyday porrada? We're gonna try to kill each other, wrist locks, leg locks, all of that like evil stuff. We want to get there with proper glycogen storage. We want to get there with the optimal status of hydration. We always want to be hydrated. If we're gonna do multiple rounds, we want to consider supplementing with carbohydrates during the session, and then we need carbohydrates to recover after the open mat, right? I'm just discussing carbohydrates now because you ask for carbohydrates, not protein and fat.
Yes.
Differently, say we have a strength and conditioning session. Say we're training plyometrics. It's another type of work. Doesn't how do you say? Doesn't involve the same type of doesn't have the same demands in terms of macronutrients. In that case, even if we don't fuel properly, even if we don't fuel heavily on carbohydrates, we can still like have a fair session. It's one of the few cases when you don't really need to, in my opinion, to load on carbs. A session like a plyometric one, you're gonna have long rest. You're basically you just want to train your body to be response to a nervous stimulus. But the strength and conditioning session, open mats, or drilling also might be like a different, like full within that case where we don't have to fully pack our body with carbs and supplement in during the process. But any other type of activity which involves an high pace needs to be fueled before, during, and after the workout. Um, Especially if we have multiple training sessions per day. Um, I think if we have, say, a jiu-jitsu class in the morning and then we're having, say, an open mat at night, and say we start recharging just after the first session, the recovery is going to be slower, it's going to be impaired, and we might not be ready, depending on how much time we have in between the session, to perform on the second one. So yeah, people like eat pasta, go faster. That's what they say.
Yeah. So speaking of, I've been so excited to ask you about this
Yeah,
because Mikey Musumeci is such a
yeah,
phenomenal jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's incredible.
yeah,
He continually shows up time over time and just proves his technical skill, his athleticism, but also from a fan standpoint, I think Mikey is good for jiu-jitsu. He is appearing as a good person, right? Like
yes,
I think he represents the sport well, and I don't think that that's always true for some of these athletes, given that it's fight sports, right? Part of fight
yes,
sports is that you're a fighter, like you're brash, and that's part of the brand. That's part of what you have chosen to do for a living. Mikey is like a secret assassin. Like the guy looks so unassuming, and he will tie you up in a knot and choke you out before you even say hello, right? That's how good he is. The dude eats more pasta and pizza than anyone I know. And I know that there's people out there that see that and they go, damn, I wish I could do that. Can we do that? How is he consuming so many carbohydrates and is that really true? Is he eating other things also?
um,
How does a guy like Mikey function? And because you've worked with him side by
yes,
side, right?
yes. And I'm still like in touch with him. We talk. So Mikey, unfortunately, was one of those people afflicted by the no carb plague back in the days. That's before we started to work together. I think that was the time where he won words and he had to shave his head. Um, After that, I moved to America. Um, I was lucky enough to win ADCC with Tanquinho, and Mike, I think, reached out to him to have some info about how he could like be healthy and stuff. So he connected me. We talked the first time, and I realized there was an issue. Now, the big part of our work at the beginning was make him understand, make him realize that he could eat, be lean, perform by also having carbohydrates in his diet. We added that, and then I'll say Mike is unique. Is a unique athlete, and he kind of like by himself he created this Musumechi diet. That's the way he referred to
Yeah.
it, I guess, with Joe Rogan chatting about that. He created this Musumechi diet where he eats, or at least he used to eat, once per day, heavily packing the meal with carbs, lower protein intake, and oil mainly, fats mainly through extra virgin olive oil. Is it true that he really
Yeah.
ate like that? Yes, for sure, absolutely. um it is something. I mean, we chat about that. I honestly talked to him about the possibility of changing some things up, because I think it will do even better on another protocol. But is is we're in a process. It takes time. It takes time to switch from one thing to another. But yes, it really it's like that. And could other people eat like that? um well, again, I don't think it is the specific like 1 meal per day um regimen will be okay for most people. But if you were to train as much as Mikey, I think, yeah, you like, how do you say, I don't want to use the word like survive on it, but like, yeah, you could eat like that. You it is just, how do you say, yeah, I think it'll be better for most people to split that amount of calories in multiple meals per day, I would say.
Yeah.
And for people questioning the amount of calories that he eats, you should live 24 hours with Mikey to understand how much he trains. Um, he
Yeah, I was
trains
gonna say I
crazy.
think it's easy for people to look at someone, especially on social media, and go, you're seeing a snapshot. You're seeing the guy in his kitchen eating one meal.
Yeah,
You have no idea that these guys live in the academy. In some cases, literally live in the academy, right? They are
yeah,
in the morning, they're doing a session. In the afternoon, they're doing a session. And in the evening, they're doing a session. And they do that every single day, all week long. So if you took their resting metabolic rate and then you measured their active metabolic rate, they're probably barely even meeting a baseline eating like that because they are working so much. And when they train, there is a difference in martial arts when you are training with your fellow teammates and when you watch the top guys train with other top guys and they're all trying to become the absolute best. There is no
yeah,
chill. There's calculated chill and there's a ton of work. So they are going hard, calculatedly, but in a different capacity than the average person. And to be fair, a lot of this boils back down to the original principle that you talked about, which is energy balance. Like if your expenditure is in excess of your consumption, then you can have your consumption be what it may. The problem in America is that most people's consumption is super high and their expenditure is relatively low because of all the factors that you had mentioned earlier. So
yeah,
it's so easy for companies and marketing to demonize a macronutrient or demonize a vegetable or a piece of food instead of looking at the whole problem in earnest, which is that the balance is messed up. You're driving to Starbucks and you're getting a venti mocha, whatever super sugar drink, and then you're driving to your office, you're taking the elevator upstairs, and then you're sitting all day.
yeah,
There's nothing. So no matter what you eat, right, it's going to be in
yeah,
excess. It's just
yeah.
I like on your website you have a little snippet um, mentioning just like this failure to recognize the socio-cultural significance of food in our lives.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I love that. I love that because it's food is so beautiful, man. It's
Yeah,
so beautiful and it's so culturally important. I mean, you go around
yes,
the world and some of the most unique experiences you can have in another country is eating their food because it's
yes.
been passed down from you're taking a bite of time and it's that's special. You should fucking enjoy the hell out of that.
Oh yeah, of course, because that's exactly what you're saying. Nutrition, it is not just I guess macronutrients. It's a social moment, you know.
Right.
It's a lot of psychology inside that. Um, a lot of things that revolve around the table are proven, I guess, to increase longevity. Eating with other people, talking to other people while eating instead of watching in front of the television um, will create something very positive. Um, Having, like, as we say in Italian, la passeggiata, so you eat with your friends, then you go walking around the block, around the neighbor a little bit. It's healthy.
Yep.
That's why there are situations. I don't know if you're familiar with the French paradox. Um, it is basically, there are certain areas where people enjoy a glass of wine with meals, and they have, which of course we know that ethanol is not good for us, but they still have
Yes.
very very big, how do you say, they have a long life. It's not, it's, of course it's not the wine that makes you live longer. If anything, the wines works a little bit
Right.
against you. Yes, if you want to be apologetic like me on Christmas Day, when I'm gonna go with a bottle of Ripasso Valpolicella, then you say it's the polyphenols, the polyphenols.
Yeah.
You go like, yeah, it's the polyphenols, antioxidants, and you start drinking. But you know, if you want to be serious, you know that ethanol is not good for you. But what revolves around the glass of wine is all the social aspect, meeting
Conversation.
people, you know, scream, laugh. That has a role,
Yeah.
and that's also what I trying to do during fight weeks. You know, with the UFC guys, I'm there with them with fight weeks, and I'm not a chef. I think chef is something much better than what I am in terms of cooking, but I'm a amateur cook. I'm a recreational cook, and I like to cook for people. But like
Yeah.
having the whole team sitting at the same table, discussing the fight, discussing joking and
Yeah.
stuff, it's it brings a positivity to the fight camp, to the fight week, and somehow I think it can have a positive impact on the fight. I really believe that.
Yeah, when we were in so when we were in Germany, we took a train from Berlin to Prague, and we walked around Prague while we were there. And I distinctly remember there was this one day, our hotel was up in this little like up below the castle, and as we were walking by, there was this cafe that we would walk by every day. And at like 3:30, 4 p.m., you would see this huge group of adults, like I would say 45 up through like 60. And they were clearly, congregating on their way home from their work or whatever like that. And they were all just sitting outside, no phones. They weren't buried in their phones, and they were all enjoying a glass of wine. And I look at that and I go, okay, science shows us one thing, right? We know that ethanol is bad for us. We know that
Yeah,
alcohol is literally poisonous in our body. It's not something that's going to promote recovery. It doesn't help us sleep better. It's not going to help us perform at a high level in anything that we do. But here are these people who, they're not binge drinking. They're not drunk college students at a party at 2 a.m. They're adults having a glass of wine together, but it was what they were doing. It was, and this happens with food too. It's not the thing, but it was the social interaction. It was the group of them together sharing life stories, whatever it was for that time in the day.
of course.
And there's a huge, maybe you don't measure that with science so robustly, but there's something there. That's a value. And then you know what they did? They would walk away. They go walk somewhere, right? So you go, you have this meal, you have a glass of wine, and you go walk. And that was a theme that kept showing up in our trip. Is that after dinner we would walk back to the hotel, or after lunch we would walk to the next place. And your digestion improves, how your body feels throughout the day improves. All of these things are just a product of like how you're interacting with food in the country.
Yeah.
And that is something that feels very different from how we interact with it here, I think.
Yeah, there's that for sure. There's also the very, I mean, America is a great place. I love America. I love America. Um, but sometimes to
Me too.
do, to make a good living, you really need to work a lot. You'll be subject to
Yeah.
a lot of stress. That can be overwhelming, and I can tell you because even though I know all these things, I'm aware of all these things, and I live the Mediterranean way. Then I came here, and there was so much going on, because basically I started from nothing. So many worries, the will to try to always like attract more people to what I do, and before I realized, I was working 7 days a week, nonstop, and you see, so it's it's not that easy to get away from these dynamics if the environment is how do you say, um, yeah, is reaching stressor. It will push you to do something different. So besides telling people how many grams of carbs they need to eat, I like to think that I'm also helping them a little bit direct their lives, or at least their relationship with food,
Yeah.
beyond just that, the, those amounts of food. I'm not never gonna call myself a life coach, by the way. That's never gonna happen. But
Speaking of food and life,
yeah,
in the last couple of minutes here, I'd love to touch briefly, just because it is geared towards performance, and this is something that I think every single person who's listening to this has come in contact with some sort of supplement marketing. And if they're not sure that that's true, there's supplements right behind me that sponsor the show. So it's everywhere that we look, right? It's part of the health and wellness culture. It's a billion-dollar industry, and it's also very confusing as a consumer to know what is safe, what is useful, what actually benefits the things that we do. So
yeah,
when you think about mixed martial arts, strength and conditioning,
yeah,
grappling, wrestling, what are kind of the initial supplements that come to mind where you're like, you know what, they increase performance. They're generally safe for most people. Of course, we should say that you should visit with your doctor in any capacity before you adopt any new supplement protocol. But what are things that come to mind that you think are necessary and useful supplements for the average grappler, wrestler, mixed martial
yes.
artist?
Can I add an introductory note to my answer? So
Yes.
the food industry is more regulated than the supplement industry. It's important for people to know the meat that you bring to the table did go through more scrutiny compared to your whey protein. That's a fact. Doesn't mean that all supplements are poorly made, but of course, some people might work, some companies might work towards the quality, some others towards the quantity. There is a huge problem for competitors under a USADA program, and that's the tainted supplement how do you say issue, and that's because for that reason
Yep.
there's little scrutiny on a supplement, even when it's on the market. So first thing is, I think as a person that trains, as a matter of fact, I'm a blue belt. As a person that trains, I will not put in
Congratulations.
os. I will not put I will not put in my body a supplement that is not third party tested. That is my first
Like NSF.
yes.
Yeah,
USADA
NSF certified. Yeah.
USADA says that the best way not to get any tainting ingredient is not to take any supplements. Broad statement, yeah, of course, is good. It's like, if you want to live longer, don't get stressed. Yes, life is different though. Then they say, if you are going to use a supplement, the gold standard for us as of today is, I mean, I didn't check this morning, but a couple of weeks ago it was like that, and it was like that for a few years now. It's NSF certified for sports. It's important to add certified for sports because NSF can be a lot of certification. Like my water filter is NSF certified, but not for sports, for I guess other agents. Yes, once we get into that area of third party tested supplements, I would say, first of all, have a food first approach. So whatever you need to put in your body, try to get it from food. That's very, very useful. In terms of supplements for the average population, again, everyone should consult with an healthcare professional, with their physician, before starting to take any supplements. I would say supplements for hydration could be useful in grappling. Definitely, especially if we train for a prolonged amount of time. Carb supplements might be helpful if we're having multiple training sessions per day or prolonged training sessions. There is of course, evidence on whey protein or essential amino acids for recovery and muscle protein synthesis. There are, of course, a strong body of evidence around creatine monohydrate. Now they're studying like the effects on creatine on concussions. There's still like a lot of research to be done, but definitely the widest studied supplement on the market. Creatine monohydrate, that's the form that he studies the most, so don't need to spend extra money on different, more expensive, more marketed forms. The very simple creatine monohydrate does the job. This I will say is the very baseline if we're talking about supplements for performance. If we want to go a little like over and add something to the equation, there's some evidence about beta-alanine. Beta-alanine can help in the type of performance that is required in jiu-jitsu. Beta-alanine is a component of carnosine, which is a protein that can, how do you say, buffer of, hopefully I use the right English words, but buffer the lactic buildup. It's not very easy to absorb, so we cannot supplement with carnosine, but beta-alanine can be supplementing with one of its components can lead to better performance. But again, this is very subjective. Some people might have some tingling that can be off-putting, can be little not the best feeling. Caffeine, of course, it has some effects on performance. There are some studies, even though the population of the study is very little. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes, I think, to increase their strength, there's some evidence about that the co-ingestion of caffeine and carbs can increase the carbs absorption rate. But I mean, I think not. Yeah, magnesium also. There's some evidence about that. But the thing is, once you handle your training periodization, once you handle your nutrition, once you handle your sleep and your hydration, you already did like 90% of the 95% of the work, and not being conservative. Then you can do that extra step and add some supplements to your regimen under the supervision of a professional. But to quote one of the greats of strength training, Louis Simmons, don't have $100 pair of shoes and a $1 squat. Have $100 squat technique and a $1 pair of shoes.
Yes.
Yeah. there's always some to upgrade on that part.
I
But
know. I think it's so funny with supplements. I get it. Psychologically, I get why people are drawn to them, because even with everything that I know, and I'm sure everything you know, I'm drawn towards them too. I like performance. I like leveling up my ability to perform in the things I like to do. And so it's easy to look to them as kind of an answer, but it is hard to get someone to accept that investing in your sleep. If you took the next year of your life and you had two people, and one of them took creatine monohydrate, electrolytes every day, beta alanine, carnitine, and they did everything, and then you took the other person and then you just got them to sleep 30 more minutes a day,
yeah,
the person who improves their sleep by 30 minutes will look like an Olympic athlete compared to a high school athlete. I mean, the performance advantages you get from just improving your sleep, which is when all the good stuff happens to your body anyway, is so much great. It's disproportionately so much greater
yeah,
than the little bit of benefit that you can get from the supplements. So I always like touching on this with professionals, because you bring such good clarity to it. You know, I love that you said you're food first. I think that's incredible. I think we should all be food first.
yes,
That's because that's the biggest chunk of where you're getting, that's where you're winning or losing,
yeah,
is the whole food sources that you are or are not consuming.
yeah.
It's not in the supplement that you got on Amazon for $15 off on Black Friday.
No.
You know?
And yeah, and stop watching those instructional while
So
you're
I
eating.
gotta
That's
ask
also
you.
another important thing. Like, enjoy the food for what it is. You don't need to stay in front of a screen while you're eating.
Yes.
That's an important part. Another thing, and here I have a chip on my shoulder, because some people laugh at me since I
Yes.
moved to America. So I like to wake up early, like around 5:30. And now, like in about 1 hour, I will take a nap, you know? If that helps you to be more productive in the second part of the day, increase your creativity, your energy level, your mood, it's like it doesn't mean that you're a lazy person, like, oh, lazy Italian. You're playing the long game, actually, because I wake up at 5:45.
Yeah.
By the time we're getting to the office at 9, I already like train my dogs. I already like started to like reply emails. I probably like already deliver a couple of protocols. Then yes, at 11 I take a break. 11:30 I cook my meal. I'm lucky enough to have the office inside the house. I eat healthy, take a 15 minutes nap. It's not that I sleep for 2 hours. By the time like I fall asleep and I sleep 15 minutes, 30 minutes has gone by, and I'm ready to rock and roll for another half a day. And when it's 10, I'm like maybe even 9:30, I'm calling it. So yeah, play the long game. That's the thing when it comes to all these variables.
Okay, so I got to ask you. As a professional, right? Like knowing everything that you know about nutrition, working with the top fighters that you've worked with as recently as Arman, who just won, right, is now probably in the serious conversation for contention for the title. I personally think that makes total sense. When you go to jiu-jitsu, when you show up for training, what do you do before and after? Like, what are you actually, as someone who coaches people on this, like, what's in your bag? What's in your water bottle when you're going to training?
Well, yes. First of all, I do jujitsu because I have fun doing jujitsu. So I'm not
Yep.
looking for that peak performance. I never competed, and I don't know if
Right.
I'm ever gonna compete. That's much different compared to. I used to be a water polo player in high school. That was much different scenario because
Yep.
there I was playing to win. So I mean, I try to apply the same principles depending on the time that I have, because of course the guys keep me busy, luckily. Either I have a protein shake with a bunch of fruit. I mix fruit, usually frozen mangoes, blueberries, whey protein, and stuff like that. Or if I was lucky enough that I bake some bread, because I like to bake my own bread at home. I make a sandwich, panino.
So good.
Now, unfortunately, the price of prosciutto bresaola, it's super outrageously high in the United States. So you know, I don't have it as much. I can use chicken breast, mix it with some arugula and some Parmigiano Reggiano. So those are the main things. But again, look at this guy here, your performance nutrition. Sometimes I don't have time. Sometimes maybe so I used to train at Cobrinha, um, and because now I relocated to another area of Los Angeles, and unfortunately I haven't been able to go anymore. But they offer a 6:30 a.m. class. Now, if you gotta drive there, wake up, drive there, maybe you don't have time to prepare a meal and digest and get there. So sometimes I'll be honest with you, I just fill my how do you say water bottle and went there, and that's it. But here's the thing: I'm not there to smash everybody or to build on those
Right.
I say characteristics that will make me win a main event fight. I'm just a recreational athlete. So at least what I can say, it's omnipresent, is the right hydration. So that's the basics, and then the rest kind of
Yes.
depends on the occasion, the time of the training and stuff.
Well, maybe the most important question that I ask you the whole day will be, what is the best pasta?
Um, I mean, easy, easy. Olive Garden.
No. Oh no. No, no, no.
Just
What is
kidding.
the best? What is the
I'm
best
just kidding.
like the best noodle? The best noodle. I mean, like
And
if
the
you had to
best
choose
pasta shape.
you have yeah, you can get it at Olive Garden, but what's the best
No, I'm
shape?
just kidding. By the way, guys, I'm kidding. Like, guys, here my here it is.
He's kidding.
You want me the Italian passport to be taken away from me? Please don't say that I said that. No.
No, this is good. You're
Sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, 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 no. I was saying, what is the best pasta shape?
Best pasta shape. I'm gonna go either with rigatoni or penne rigate. So not the one that are smooth, but the one with they're a little more like a
Ridge.
surface. Yeah. Just because of the
Yep.
the fact that they can be used with multiple types of sauce. Uh, while there's other stuff like farfalle, like linguine, that can only be used for certain types of how do you say, of topping. So yeah, maybe penne,
Yeah.
pound for pound, is the most versatile that I know. Uh, so yeah, I guess if I had to pick one, penne, but then then the sauce plays a huge role. I also like orecchiette a lot, and athletes have been loving orecchiette a lot. It's just
Yeah.
not as versatile.
There's a place here uh, called Cesarina, which is down in Point Loma, that they make their own pasta in the restaurants. They have it like basically like a plexiglass station um, where they have people back there cooking all day long while you eat. It's kind of like I mean, you have the book behind you, Italy, but if you
Yeah.
go to Italy in Century City, it's great because you can see them actually make a lot of the food. Uh, but they have that there, and it is so good. I am so freaking hungry now, actually talking about all this. Like, I want to go eat like a whack of pasta. It sounds so good. Matteo, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your insights. I think that you have a really healthy view of food, not only for the performance aspect of it, but also for the socio like for the cultural aspect of it as well, right? Like food is a big, I'm someone who believes that food is a big part of culture. I think it says a lot about cultures. And when I think in my head of memories of different places around the world that I've been, the flavor and the smell always sticks out the most. And so it's fun to talk with people that geek out on the nutritional side of it, but also just have a general appreciation and a love for food as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show, man.
I really appreciate you having me. I had a blast, and yeah, as I said, I love being able to live my life in America, and I hope I can bring my contribution overseas. As Michelin star chef Massimo Bottura is in Modena with 3 Michelin stars. Says, after all, we're from Italy, the land of slow food and fast cars.
Yes, indeed. And you said, what did you say? Eat pasta, go faster.
Yeah,
More pasta, more
exactly.
pasta.
That's the way.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. Hey, friends, Abe here. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and sticking around to the very end. If you want to support it, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or check out www.maynideapodcast.com, join the mailing list, and stay up to date on all things The Mayn Idea, from future guests, sponsorship opportunities, products that I'm using to help me perform at my best, invites to ask me anything, and any upcoming pertinent information to the show. I cannot do this show without you. It is literally why I show up each week and put these episodes together. So thank you from the bottom of my heart from being part of the community. I hope you have a great day.